Okay, we are back with another great episode of Meeting of the Minds. Today with the great Allan Wright, principal, author, theologian, scholar, you name it. He's got it. Another one of those all-around men that just awesome guy to know. Great information. Got your book right next to me. 25,
Right.
I can't really see it there. 25 questions. But thank you for being with us, Allan. Appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. I enjoy what you're doing as well and getting out there. And it's great for men to get together and promote the faith, promote each other. So I really admire what you're doing as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I should have added also comedian to all of your great qualities. Notable personality in the Catholic world. Great stuff, Allan. So, let's start talking about your school. You have a very special place that I was very blessed to go over there, speak there. Tell us about your school.
Yeah, Koinonia Academy is a school that's located in Plainfield, New Jersey. It's been around for 35 years. And really I've been principal there for 2 years, and I tell everybody I'm just building on the foundation that was set many years ago by people that sort of looked around, could sort of see where the public schools were going, and often even with Catholic schools, we're not happy with the commitment of faith that many of the schools had. Often, right. Catholic schools can be a crucifix on the wall, opening mass, closing mass, and yet the curriculum, the teachers who've never really had that encounter with Christ. And so certainly they may have their master's degrees or PhDs in education or different subject matters, but what makes a difference at the end of the day is to have contact with people who have encountered the Lord. And so at Koinonia Academy, our teachers had that encounter, and we still hold true to that. And Mondays, the whole school gathers for Rosary. Tuesday, we gather to praise God. Wednesday, I've instituted a Witness Wednesday where we bring people in like yourself to share how they've encountered Christ. And we've had the whole range from sisters to lay people, husbands, grandparents to come in and, hey, this is how my life changed. Thursdays, we have Eucharistic adoration. And Fridays, we have Mass. So those are sort of the non-negotiables that set our school forward. We're working on changing over to this Catholic liberal education. Our teachers are wonderful, well-trained, committed. So that's sort of our niche right there. And I think for parents who are looking for people that are committed to Christ and are going to give their children the best Catholic education, that's been my experience as a principal for 2 years now.
Oh, and it's great. A phenomenal job you've done. I see the great information on social media that you post, and you could just see the brother and sisterhood of the kids, and really that family atmosphere, as well as very much being devoted to Christ. Because like you said, a lot of times it's just Catholic school by name, and it's not necessarily people were trying to do that, but maybe over the years it becomes ho-hum and just clockwork, and we're not living the faith, that experience with Christ.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's some great people out there that teaching in all types of schools, even public schools, right? There are great teachers that are committed to their faith, and yet to have everybody together, that it takes 10% of people who are not with that mission. So how they teach various subjects, how they are with the kids, our view of the human person, that everyone is created in the image and likeness of God, and how can we help them not necessarily get to Harvard, but how do we help them get to heaven? And that's why parents send their kids to our school, right? So that's what it's all about.
I love it. That makes me think about what you said in the book. Instead, not to Harvard, but to heaven. The same thing. To be a disciple, we have to be disciplined.
Yeah, that's sort of that. Yeah, that's a root right there. And certainly for yourself as a high-level athlete, a trainer of athletes, and even the one class I teach at Seton Hall, the spirituality in sports.
Yes.
Discipline, commitment, dedication. You need to be a top-level athlete. You also need to be a saint. And I don't know if you've been watching the thing on Michael Jordan, The Last Dance.
I haven't been. I got to catch up.
Yeah, so there's about 10 episodes. They show 2 every Sunday night. So I've been watching it with my wife, and it's just like, he made some enemies along the way. If you be that top tier or the best, right, which we are all striving to be, the commitment that he has, and as St. Paul will say in 1 Corinthians 9, 24, 27, right, we, all the athletes participate in the race, but the award goes to one man, compete in such a way so as to win. But how do we live in the world, be normal, like to go to the gym, like to wrestle, like sports, and yet have that same passion also toward our faith? That's sort of the key.
That's great. And tell us more about your class at Seton Hall, spirituality and sport. What kind of books do they read? What kind of information is in front of them? What are they expected to know and come away with? Because that's awesome.
So one of the things, sort of a little self-promotion, that first 20
Yes.
questions book, and even Seton Hall. So I've had a great experience there when I was at the seminary and undergraduate. And yet I'm teaching a course called Spirituality and Sport. Generally have about 30, 35 students. Majority are juniors and seniors. Often many nursing majors. It's one of the core classes, so it gets a whole mix of students. Again, some brilliant kids that are tops in their field, medical field nurses, and yet their knowledge of their faith or spirituality is often just lacking. And no fault of the university or maybe their parents or their experience. But so even that word spirituality, it's like, you know what? I like to walk in the woods, right?
Yeah.
I like to, there's the ocean. Well, who doesn't like that, right?
Take some deep breaths from time to time.
I'm
I'm all about self-improvement. Remember, the spirituality is not necessarily equated with good, right? The devil is 100% spiritual.
Absolutely. And even the word religion, it comes from that Latin word for ligare, which is a ligament, right? So what are you connected to? And some people don't have any connection, or they're connected to themselves. I am, my own God. So spirituality and sport, I try to first sort of, gently say, what is their experience, right? And whether it's good or bad, or they believe or not believe, that's no problem. But I'm going to sort of present the Catholic viewpoint of what spirituality is, and then use that to sort of transition in terms of sports. And so I think most of the students, and there's always a couple athletes, swimmers, I haven't had any basketball players, but soccer players, a couple baseball players, softball, tennis, that from their experience, they know the work it takes. And so to be a top level athlete, imagine just saying, you're a senior in high school, I like basketball, I'm going to go out for the team, but with absolutely no preparation. Right now, it's nice that you think you can do that, but you need the 101. And so I think sometimes even my Catholic students, they recognize, I didn't like going to church, I didn't like learning those prayers, but maybe that's their foundation that they can fall back on. I do have some of that routine. I often make a comparison to what's that, Karate Kid, right? Yeah, I get wax on, wax off, and he gets to the point, why the heck am I doing this, right? And all of a sudden he attacks him, and it's like, whoa, right?
Exactly.
He defends it. So again, these prayers, the foundation of Catholics, of kneeling, of silence, these things are important. So one of the books that I use is The Mental Game of Baseball. I have it right here.
Excellent.
Mental Game of Baseball. And, the topics are what? Setting proper goals, expectations, dedications, responsibility, attitude. Like, how much of that is so part and parcel with our faith? And on every chapter, maybe say 20 pages, the guy gives like 50 examples from athletes of like the mental game. So you just strike out 3 times in a row, right? You miss that foul shot, you throw an interception. What's the mindset, your attitude of getting back in the game? And so as people of faith, oh my God, I just blew it, right? I just sinned horrifically. I missed this opportunity to do good. I'm no good. All those attitudes come into the Christian faith as well. And so we have, St. Paul says, or letter to the Hebrews, let us keep our eyes fixed on Christ, who inspires and perfects our faith. So how do the focus on Christ, focus on our walk, despite what other people may be saying to us, or often those voices in our head, like, I wish somebody else was here, right? Wish Father Fire and Brimstone or Sister Mary Holy Water was here, so I would be able to, they'd be able to answer the question. But you know what? God has given us a journey. And so that mental game of baseball, I think, is just, I love it. And some of the athletes he uses does seem to be now about 20, 25 years old. A lot of the students don't recognize, but when they're writing their reflection papers, they mention Tom Seaver or Steve Carlton or Joe Namath, or some of the things that maybe those who are involved in sports or know a little bit about the history can relate to. Another book, Finding True Happiness, Father Robert Spitzer.
Sure.
And he has a number of books out which are great. But he talks about the different levels of happiness. Can an atheist be happy? Absolutely, right? give him a nice cigar, a beer, a steak dinner, a chocolate cake, the guy's going to be happy. I'm going to be very happy, right? And yet he's going to be hungry again. And so there's one form of happiness. How do we get to that? He said that fourth level, right? Where we're really self-actualized, that spiritual element, that transcendent. Is it enduring? Is it deep? Our experiences, our relationships. So I really like to mingle in Spitzer and the mental game of baseball. I do add some reflections from Thomas Merton, because he speaks a lot about silence, a lot about finding God within. And even Mother Teresa says that God's primary language is silence. And so that's sort of what we're trying to do there, to move the conversation forward. This year for my final project, I asked them what their favorite sport was, and I matched them up with a athlete, like a baseball player who's a Christian, who's Catholic, has a spiritual life, and a saint. So matching up someone like Mariana Rivera with Pierre Giorgio Frasetti. What do they have in common? What are their passions? What are they good at? So it's trying to sort of, introduce them to some of these great saints, and also from their own experience. So I'm trying to be very practical in my approach. So.
Yeah, I see that a lot, especially with sports. Kids they're hands-on, so they need to take the theory, the philosophy, the theology, the psychology, and make it very practical, down to earth. And what does it mean for me? Who are examples that I could relate to? It's a great strategy.
Yeah, sometimes even you hear people in the church complain, oh, there's too much sports and sports on Sunday. I get it, I agree, and yet when I see these coaches practice, the minute the kids get to the field or to the court, they're active, they're running, they're stretching, they're getting the ball, they're passing, they're doing drills, they're engaged. How often do we put in a video? All right, we have an hour of religious education, here's a video, and that's it. Or a poorly prepared lesson, or no energy from the teacher. Those things, I think often with faith, it's more caught than taught. And so how can we, be that example of joyful lived life of discipleship?
That's it. No, that's great stuff. That's why I love talking to you about this stuff, because I feel like we could go all day with this. I love the silence, the indwelling of the Trinity that you're referring to, finding God within. Obviously not in a pantheistic way, but the indwelling of the Trinity, and the silence, and how as athletes, or just me as a very strong extrovert, how hard that is. That's the hardest thing, shutting it down. And Lord, you do it to me. I can't do it without you.
Yeah. There was a movie, Eat, Love, Pray,
Love. Yeah.
Something like that. I didn't see it.
Me either. Yeah.
Too much of a chick flick. I do use Father Robert Barron's sort of critique of it. It's only about 10 minutes on YouTube. And he says, she starts with food, the body, that's great, right? Her desire to pray, that's a good thing. A desire to love is all a good thing. But he says, in her quest where she visits these different countries, at the very end, she says, I have found God in me, as me. And Father Robert Barron, Bishop Barron says, no, you're not God, right? It's the trajectory of the Christian walk as I have experienced God. Now I am sent out on mission. So it's not like I'm going to find myself and I've self-actualized. It's like I've encountered God. Now in silence, where is my vocation, my calling? What is my mission? And so he points to even someone like, all the saints, whether St. Francis or St. Ignatius, who, was a great extrovert, soldier, gets his leg shattered. Now he's just forced to read in the hospital. And unfortunately for him, the only books they have are religious books. But he starts reading the life of Christ and develops this whole spirituality with what? With an outward, a missionary thrust. So where we are living, how we have this access to social media, how can our encounter with Christ not just be for ourselves, but rather that trajectory of how can I serve others? How can I bring the good news to others in a way that's not imposing, that you have to believe this or else, rather just to propose, hey, this is what happened in my life. And that's sort of what I think our mission is.
That's right. The Bible is basically a series of people who were called and then sent, right? You're called and then you're sent. Love is diffusive, right? So that's
Beautiful. Yep. Well said. Yep.
And then I think also of is it Ratzinger who said man finds himself by making a sincere gift of himself. Maybe that's Gaudium et Spes. I don't know, but it's all about getting instead of turning inward, it's going outward.
Yeah. Yeah. I think even, those bracelets with that phrase a couple years ago, WWJD, what would Jesus do? I'm all for that. But recently I've been seeing this other one, HWLF, that he stands for he would love first. I agree, Jesus would love. But I have a feeling that sometimes the way people propose that, it's almost like license to do whatever the heck you want. You can go ahead in your sin, or again, for yourself as a trainer and athletes, if you see somebody training a wrong way, that you're going to put too much strain on that muscle, that ligament, it's not loving for you to not speak up, or to say, you know what, you're doing something, you're practicing, I admire that, but the way you're going about it is not going to be helpful in the long run. So yeah, we have to love, but sometimes love in speech, love in action can be correcting, or even in the church's crazy word of excommunication, right? We're going to put you outside the community because we love you. And you need to recognize that this is not helpful. It's not God's will. So sometimes even how our culture uses the word love, it's just freedom to do whatever the heck you want. And I don't think that's loving.
Yeah, a lot of it, unfortunately, is this immanentism that Pope St. Pius X spoke about, how that's how we're searching for the answers within, as opposed, and how things make us feel, where the term, even the word, the truth, kind of all of a sudden becomes synonymous with being aggressive or being negative, whereas the truth is love, right? Christ says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. So, and he's all love, he's all mercy, he's all justice. So those have to be, the truth has to be the truth, the good, the beautiful. It's all the same coin. It's all the same thing.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that we do have going for us, I think, is the truth. And for those people that do the opposite or think I'm just, self-fulfillment, do we trust that, okay, I'm going to pray for you, but hopefully that you'll find out that continuing to do that, there's still that something missing, which Augustine found out beautifully, and our hearts will be restless until we rest in thee. I remember picking up that, the Confessions of Augustine 30 years ago and saying, hey, I can't wait till I, come across this phrase halfway through the book. And it's like on the, it's like on
boom, right away.
I'm like, all right, I get it. So
that's happened to me. And then I put the book down.
Yeah. Well, then when he starts talking about time near the end of the book, I'm like, I think he's speaking a language I don't understand. But yeah, I think, and we do live in a world that, people are experiencing that, and whether it's people's addictions to opioids, to drugs, to a whole number of things, that maybe even during this time of quarantine, that, maybe it will allow people some silence to listen, to the God that still continues to speak in the silence of our heart.
That's right. That's right. Isn't it? Was it in Isaiah where that's where the Lord was found in the gentle breeze, the silence?
That's well.
You probably have it memorized.
Well, again, it's with Elijah, right? Elijah has this great battle. God defeats Baal. He humiliates him, and it's like he's king of the hill, and yet people don't convert. Elijah's like, what more do you people need? And so he goes back to where he experienced God before, and there was an earthquake.
Not in the earthquake.
Not there, but it was in that small, still voice. So, I think there's Verizon perhaps commercial a number of years ago. Can you hear me now? Remember that?
Yeah.
And that's pretty good. I think God thought of it first. So whether it's that small, soft voice, or whether it's like with Moses, right? That dramatic burning of the bush, or taking Hosea to the desert so God can speak to him one-on-one. Or, Isaiah walked around naked for 3 years. I don't suggest anybody doing that. Yet dramatic action, Jeremiah smashed pottery. So sometimes we need to be reached in the way that God can get our attention. And God is the hound of heaven. He pursues us because that's what love does. And so God will get to us.
I think of the divine mercy image, and Christ is stepping towards us. So he's making that first move. We love because we were loved first. But
Right.
like you said, we don't want to use that as an excuse to then step back. No, we're supposed to go out there. We're supposed to imitate the master.
So I'm just learning something here. So in that image, which I've seen 1,000 times, which is on the front of our door, he has a foot forward.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that.
He's making a move towards us. I got another good one for you. That with that image, if you look at it, the original, because we always
I
think
saw the original. I've been to Krakow.
Yeah.
I spoke at World Youth Day, and I visited Faustina's church, saw her relics, the whole thing. But again, I didn't.
It happens. But the original, where it's all black in the background, where it doesn't have the cloudy everything, it's just pitch black. So interesting thing about that is if you look at the rays, the top part of Jesus's tunic, because in that picture he's the high priest, right? The priest wore the tunic once a year. If you look at Hebrews, that's where you would see the letter to the Hebrews, and then look at the divine mercy image. Christ is the high priest who goes into the Holy of Holies. Now think about in the temple, in the Holy of Holies, it was pitch black, and the only light was the Shekinah glory. And it's the same thing with Christ coming out of the heaven, the Holy of Holies. Well, you see the top of his tunic is white. The bottom part of his tunic looks blue. And one of the things I thought is it's almost like the rays are hitting the Blessed Mother, her blue mantle, before they even come to us. Maybe that's just me, but that's what I see.
You got a great devotion to Mary. I'll go with that.
It's good stuff. What else was I thinking with sports? What are, actually, I want to change gears with the questions. That's what I wanted. I really love the concept of how many times Christ uses questions to get us to think. Sometimes maybe as educators, we talk, and don't ask the questions as much. We have to imitate the master.
Yeah, you know what? I did take a class at Kane University a number of years ago on the Holocaust and teaching prejudice reduction, the whole thing. And there was a professor there, Professor Priel. And I don't know if he's still alive. I hope he is. He seemed kind of old when I had him, 93 perhaps it was, but sort of, always dressed kind of drab and not like yourself or hopefully myself, high energy and okay, let's go, right? Very sort of mundane. And yet I would drive home thinking my mind would be going a mile a minute. And what is it about this guy? And there was a couple other women that had taken the course a year before, and we sort of having the same conversation, and sort of came up that he just asks great questions. And he himself was a rabbi. And I think that stuck with me. And I'd written a couple previous books. And then I said, is there any greater teacher than Jesus? So how did Jesus teach? And to my surprise, Jesus asked over 100 questions in the Gospels. And the very first words out of the mouth of Jesus in the Gospel of John, what are you looking for? Not a bad question, right? First words out of the mouth of Jesus in Luke's Gospel, in the temple. Why were you searching for me? So I did those questions because they're divine. If we allow them to resonate, or even better, to buy my book.
Yes.
I'm just joking, but to help sort of, maybe process some of those. What are we looking for? And for we who have encountered Christ, it's a much easier way to have a conversation rather than, if you don't know God, you're going to go to hell, you're missing out so much, and I'm not going to have a conversation with you. But by asking those questions, I found that people do come back. What am I looking for? Allow the Holy Spirit to use that question. But also with questions, I think there's some challenging things as well. You go by most churches, and even a lot of Catholic churches, the number one word, we welcome you, right? When I watch TV late at night, especially during the quarantine, you see who wants, amazing abs, right? 6-pack abs, right? And I want 6-pack abs. I want huge arms. And I'll watch until I hear this phrase. It's so easy. And I just go, click, because you're lying to me. You're lying to me. Whatever prayer group or Bible study at a Catholic church said, oh, Gene, you want to be part of our Bible study? I don't think you're ready yet. I don't think you're committed yet. Because at our Bible study, we memorize a verse every week. And you better show up prepared. And that's something that I think, why do the Navy SEALs attract so many, right? They get the same pay as any other person in the Army, but that challenge. So can these questions even challenge us as Catholics? Or for those of you who are watching who are committed Catholics, when's the last time somebody, really challenged you? Or said, I don't think you're ready for our prayer group because the commitment level is just too high. That I've never heard that in all my life. Again, we need to be welcoming, meet people where they're at. But is there a point, if we're going to be leaders, that we can go and make that challenge and raise the bar a little bit, that people would say, who are these people? And the fact is how much we love, right? So.
Yeah, no, and I think about St. Maximilian Kolbe, obviously with us, the strong devotion to the Militia Immaculata that we got going in New Jersey. But for him, it was his criteria for discernment. If they could become part of the group was, are you totally consecrated to the Blessed Mother? If not, then it's a no. It's an easy answer. We do need to be challenged. Thinking about it, a lot of the things you're saying there, and even before, I wish there was a class or something we learned proper fraternal correction, iron sharpens iron, how we could express the truth with love, because we do need to share the truth with other people. And sometimes the truth is a harsh reality that people aren't, we've been coddled, we've been pampered. So we prefer to be told what we want to hear, but we know that's not charitable, like you said before. So I think what would be some good strategies for us, and then keep going back to the book and asking the questions, but what could we do to share the truth with love, where we could challenge people, we welcome them in, but at the same time we say, hey, it's tough, it's hard, and it's not always the answers you want.
Yeah, and we certainly, maybe the church itself, our Sunday gathering, we do welcome anybody in around the table. Christ gives himself. But again, are there groups that we can form within the church, or not, like you said, with what you're doing? And I know religious orders, the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal, I know you have relationships with. I teach the Missionaries of Charity. This is tough, right? It's difficult. And Missionaries of Charity, they don't even have mirrors in their houses.
Wow.
So when I bring my, kids or daughters or whatever, it's always like, hey, there's one.
Yes.
And, why is that? Because they're not concerned with themselves.
Right.
So again, there are orders out there that are growing because they are so demanding. And yet, how can we maybe have that fraternity that we can also be accountable? And so I think it does happen in small groups. And, but again, there's always a danger, again, once we have a small group, we just want to say, hey, we're here and we're going to do this for 10 years, as opposed to have a vision. Hey, after 2 years, let's split up. Let's invite more people in so there's growth, right?
Right.
Pray that the Lord will add to their numbers. So it's difficult, it's time, it's commitment. People are the king of busy in the Northeast, I think, especially. But again, is it something that we can be committed to in our own faith and have that desire that God will put there for us to want more of him?
Yeah, that's great. You're right. It is a tough balance. It's not easy, but it's something that we want to pursue. And then, like you said, having the groups, yes, it's great. We get the group going, but then you want to make sure you're splitting it out, because the goal is always to reach more and more people. That's what, right? The Great Commission, like you said before. So if we're not doing that, if we're just getting comfortable in our little group, what good is that?
Yeah. I always sort of reflected at, Matthew 28, the Great Commission. These guys had just sort of heroically failed. They did receive the Holy Spirit. But how do you go about this? So Jesus, a master teacher, before there was a Great Commission, in Matthew 10, sort of what's called the Little Commission. And he sent them out 2 by 2. Then they went out. Then they came back. So Jesus prepared them, right? Gave them a little bit of a taste of what ministry will be like. And he gave them sort of that, like I said, that taste of ministry. So the Great Commission to go out to the whole world.
Right. Again,
we can start where we are. Maybe it'll take 2 years, 3 years to build that trust, train people, start small. And again, maybe have that heart for who's that person that maybe we wouldn't expect to invite in. Is every opportunity a mission opportunity? You look at some of the characters Jesus invited in, fishermen, tax collectors, zealots. Do we just sort of, as I say, do we, Christ calls us to be fishers of men, but often we become keepers of the aquarium, right? We have the same 5 people that just get it, and we just end there as opposed to trying to reach out. So, and it's difficult, right? You get rejection. People think we're going too far, but when you find those people that are committed, that's where change happens.
That's great. Excellent stuff. Other books that you wrote. What else do you have out there?
I'll
link them all in the show notes so people could click them because it's great stuff.
Fantastic. The first book I wrote, no longer in print, but silent, Witnesses in the Gospels, but those people who made the Gospels yet don't say a word. So the 4 friends of the paralytic, the servers at Cana, those who moved the stone for Lazarus, they made the Bible. I'm happy if I make a bulletin, right? So what is their story like? Another book called Jesus in the House did win an award, Family Life category. The word home appears 30 times in the Gospels. The word house appears 99 times. So Jesus is healing, teaching, forgiving, sharing meals, takes place not on the sandy shores of the Galilee or the bustling streets of Jerusalem, but takes place in people's homes. Where did Mary share the good news of the Annunciation? In the home of Zachariah and Elizabeth. The very end, where were the disciples' eyes opened? The road to Emmaus, in the house. Zacchaeus, the 4 friends of the paralytic, Simon's mother-in-law. So much of what Jesus does brings in the house. And how can we too make that presence of Christ by our forgiveness, our sharing meals, our love for one another take place in the home? So I got 4 kids, age 16 to 6. And the other day we did have a little bit of a family meeting. It was he left. My 6-year-old son has 3 older sisters, and he's often the antagonist. And I quoted Familiaris Consortio. I'm like, all right, let me bring it down. But Pope John Paul says the school is a family of love. And if you got 4 kids, brothers and sisters, and you have to sacrifice. You can't always have it your way. So there are ways that we can bring our faith into our home, even where there are difficulties, which there always are. But it's a great, hopefully, teaching moments.
Excellent. No, I love it. And I love how you're able to pull out all those words, how many times this was found in the Gospels. I think it's great. And I think it's catchy. It's catchy. It brings the people in, and the Lord knew what he was doing when the Holy Spirit putting it all together. And it's great seeing how you've been able to synthesize a lot of these different things and pull them into these great lessons. Excellent.
Yeah, and if you look at the end of some of the letters, I know Romans, Corinthians, Colossians, Philemon, St. Paul sends greetings to all these people and to the church that meets in your house. So when Paul's writing to the Colossians, it's not a mega church of 2,000 families. I don't know, archaeologists tell us that the largest homes back then could accommodate, maybe if they had a courtyard, 40, 50 people. Right. He's writing to these small communities. That's really that brought us to where we are today.
That's right.
Committed. They were not always perfect. Just read Corinthians, right? But they were enthusiastic. They were newly found in their faith, so they're enthusiastic, and yet Paul had to give them that shepherd's hand to guide them into the right ways. So
that's awesome stuff, Allan. I appreciate it. We could do this again for hours. We'll definitely do it again. Great stuff. Like I said, I'll link your books to the show notes under here. Make sure you guys check it out. Like I said, always great information, always a fun time speaking with you. So thank you for being on the show.
Good. And I'm glad that you're out there as well. Your energy with your wife and your kids and, being focused. It's what we need more of. So thanks for setting all this up for the spiritual strength. I appreciate being on.
Praise God. All right. We'll talk soon.
God bless you.
Bye.